The Mapayapa Group. In this story, I'll be just reading it from the book because I've already done summarizing it. You can just read while listening. The setting. Mapayapa, a town in the southern part of the zone and an area known to be a sanctuary of guerrillas of the New People's Army or NPA, was recently attacked by the armed forces of the Philippines in line with their counter-insurgency operations. The military operation lasted for 3 months, until the end of February 1994, when the military shifted its operation to an adjoining province. On March 10, 1994, a 5-day fact-finding medical mission composed of government representatives and members of non-governmental organizations or NGOs went to Mapayapa to investigate reports of military abuses to bring food and medical relief to the residents. When the missions arrived, Mapayapa had already been abandoned by the residents. There were 88 houses burned and 26 destroyed by the bombings and strafings, most of which took place during the last week of February. The people's crops like coconut and camote had also been burned, while more than 1,000 cabins of rice had been abandoned. Domestic animals had been either butchered or taken away, and kitchen and farm implements were destroyed. The fact-finding team found 300 families, a total of 1,600 persons, 14 kilometers from Mapayapa. The displaced families were living either in makeshift evacuation houses or under trees and were subsisting on edible roots, leaves, and fruits. 15 children had already died of measles, and many were malnourished. The helping team. The mission team immediately put up a makeshift clinic and provided emergency medical and food assistance to the victims. In addition to this, however, a social worker of FIND or FIND or families of victims of involuntary disappearances, who was a member of the team, saw another serious problem: the violent abduction from the victims' present location of 7 male residents who were accused of being either NPA guerrillas or guerrilla supporters by a group of armed men on March 8. When these men did not return the day following their abduction, their relatives, accompanied by some community elders, went to the military to inquire about them. The military denied having taken them into their custody. This plunged this displaced community into a greater depression, particularly the families of the 7 who had disappeared. On the first day, the fine social worker quickly made home visits with the families of 7 men, giving each family a one-shot psychological first aid. She gave them direct advice on what they could under the situation, and give information on material resources that could be availed on from both the local and national government. In addition, with the help of an elder family member or relative, she was able to identify the family member from each of the 7 families who was the most affected and would benefit from the participation in a crisis group which she had decided to organize. She was able to meet each of these prospective group members during the same home visits. The invited each one personally explained the purpose of the group meetings and provide psychological support. As she listened to each person's narration of what happened, the social worker conducted short individual interviews with the 7 prospective crisis group members in order to identify the issues needed to be addressed in the group immediately and what issues could be addressed later. The workings saw that the victims' confusion, they were trying to deal with their problems all once. She was convinced of the need for a crisis group where the members could share, discuss, and prioritize their problems, support, and counsel each other and plan solutions. The group members. The most affected family members of the 7 men abducted by the military were the following. First, Monina, a 32 years old with 3 children aged 1 to 5 and wife of Ramon, who was picked up by armed men from their makeshift house while having supper with his family on March 8. The children cried at the armed men forcibly took their father away, and all she could do was embrace them. Marina was crying as she narrated what happened. She has hardly slept since the incident and feels hopeless and desperate about their situation. She feels guilty about not having been able to call for help to prevent the abduction, but said she was too stunned to be able to do anything. She also feels very angry as she said her husband had not wronged anybody. She said she has neglected her duties to her children because she was too overwhelmed by the recent events. The second member was Myrna, a 36 years old with 2 children aged 4 and 7 and wife of Miguel who was approached by armed men with drawn guns pointed at him in Sari-Sari store nearby. A neighbor who saw what happened rushed to inform Myrna about it. But when Myrna arrived in the scene, her husband was already inside the van, his face blooded. She also saw a neighbor seated beside him, in handcuffs. She was shocked by why she saw and could only shout and cry after the van had left. She ran to their house when she realized that she had left her 2 small children by themselves. She said, is so confused and feels hopeless about her family. The third member is Elisa, a 26 years old, 6 months pregnant, and the wife of Rick, who was with Myrna's husband Miguel and in Sari-Sari store and was also pushed into the van by the armed men, then handcuffed. The other residents scampered away as they were also threatened with guns. Elisa said she was washing dishes when she heard the commotion outside. She ran when she saw the armed men taking her husband. Her neighbors held her back because the armed men also pointed their guns at her. All she could do was scream and cry, pleading with them not to take her husband away. She was crying continuously during the workers' home visit. She said she was already feeling depressed about the burning of their house. She know how feels really helpless because she is pregnant and does not know if her husband is still alive. The fourth victim or fourth member is Cora, a 35 years old with 4 children aged 2 to 14 and wife of Mario who was already about to go to bed when the armed men abducted him. Not wanting to disturb his children who were asleep, he signaled to Cora to just keep quiet and assured her that nothing would happen to him because he is innocent. He told her to just pray for him and to ask the community elders. for help in case there is delay in the release. She cried intermittently while narrating what happened. She said the armed men were quite cruel to her husband, pushing him and pointing their guns in his head. She had got the military situation, but they denied having him in their custody. She thought the loss of their house was the worst thing that could happen to them. But with the disappearance of her husband, she feels despondent. The fifth member was Milagros, a 28 years old with a 4-month-old baby and wife of Jaime, who was also abducted while having supper. Milagros was breastfeeding her baby when the armed men barged into their house. The incident happened so fast and all she could remember was how she put down her crying baby in the duyan and rushed to follow her husband, who was held by two men while another took a gun in his head. She shouted and they pushed her so hard that she fell on her knees. She said that before she could get up, the one had left. She said she and her neighbors were still in shock over what happened. She has been crying and is so upset because she has been unable to breastfeed her baby properly. She is very worried because of the military was denied having taken her husband along with the other men in their area. The sixth member was Aling Miling, a 54 years old with six children aged 18 to 34. Her youngest son, Mello, was taken by the armed men as he was entering their makeshift house. He cried for help and pleaded with the armed men not to take him. Alimili shouted her resistance, but she was completely ignored. She They handcuffed Mello and pushed him into the van, where he saw three of their neighbors' sons also in handcuffs. Alimiling has very little sleep since this happened. She blames herself not only for not having helped her son, but also having brought him up to care about and be helpful to other people, which she thinks is the reason they took him away. The seven victims was Aling Lydia, a 56 years old with four children ages 22 rather to 30, and mother of Fidel, a volunteer organizer in the community who was helping facilitate the distribution of relief goods from the parish church. Alegria said that when the armed men entered their house, they condemned Fidel for being in NPA or New People's Army supporter by providing supplies to the NPA guerrillas. Alegria was very emotional and said she feels very guilty because her son had been wanting to leave the place for months because of rumors that he was a suspect, but she did not want to leave for fear of being separated from the relatives and friends. She has not slept since the incident of her family is worried about her. She was constantly staring at Fidel's picture, which she took out from the baul, the only item the family was able to save when their house was burned. Helping goals. The social worker formulated a plan with the following goals. At the end of four 3-hour sessions for 4 consecutive days, the group shall have been able to: first, cope with the emotional crisis caused by the disappearance of their loved ones, and second, make realistic plans about what action to take in connection with their disappearance. That will be all, and thank you for listening. Bye bye, and loving you all.